Shvua Tov, Larry and Betty, welcome, welcome. It's good to see you. Okay, so we're live, waiting, see if anybody else comes on, and we'll start in about a minute. Okay. Let me share. I'm going to share the link with people so that others can come on. Remind them. Okay, so we're going to make Havdalah. If you have wine or a little bit of tea, maybe, you could join along with me. I'm going to put little, one second, let me put this back so you can see what I'm doing. Shana, when I start making Havdalah, you'll pull this, you'll turn this up. Okay? Let's see if you can see me. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, I prepared a couple things on my table for Havdalah. The first thing I have, of course, is wine. We make Havdalah with wine. I have a little bottle here mixed with some wine from the Rebbe, which I will use. I also have a candle for Havdalah. We use a candle, we use light, and The reason for the candle on Motzei Shabbat is very significant this week. As we begin making Havdalah, the first week, Shabbat Bereishit, the first Torah portion, in which we discussed today, as we read the Torah, the creation of the world and the creation of Adam and Eve, who were sent out of the garden. So until Shabbos was over, the first Shabbos they spent was with tremendous light, the original light, and then after the light of the Garden of Eden, and after Shabbos, it became dark. And we're taught that God prepared for them 2 stones, which they rubbed together, and they created fire. And that was the first, according to our tradition, was the first time they had fire. And it was at that point that they realized that they didn't have clothing, and the only part of their body that was covered was their nails, which is the reason why during the Havdalah, when we make the blessing on the candle, we look at our nails to remind ourselves of that part of history. We also, on Shabbos, we're taught that we have what's called an Neshama Yetera, or Neshama Yesera, which is an extra soul, or an extra part of our soul that we are connected to, and we can feel on Shabbat. And after Shabbos, the moment Shabbos leaves, the extra part of our soul also leaves. And so at that moment, we want to calm our soul down, and one of the ways to do it is by smelling some spices. So we also make a blessing on Motzei Shabbat, a blessing on the besamim, on the spices. So again, we have the yayin, the wine, we have the ner, candle, and we have the besamim, the spices, to smell during the Havdalah. Once again, when we make Havdalah and you join us in this week or future weeks, if you have a cup of wine or grape juice or some hot tea and can join us in making the blessing yourself, that would be a wonderful thing. Whenever we pour our wine for Kiddush or Havdalah, we let it spill because wine is blessing, and we want our blessings to spill over. I'm going to light the candle. I didn't have the stone, so I used the match. Okay. In the candle, there are, the Havdalah candle has to be at least 2 wicks. So this candle has 2 wicks in it. If you don't have a Havdalah candle, you could just use to remind us again of the 2 stones rubbed together. I believe that's the reason. We have 2. If you don't have a candle with 2 wicks, then you would take 2 candles or 2 matches and put them together during the Havdalah. So this time I'm going to begin the Havdalah. When we finish, when I said, Shani can turn it back. Okay. Hinei el Yeshuas yaftach v'lo yachad, ki oziv zimras Adonai v'yehi li Yeshua. U'shaftem ma'ayim v'sasem imayne Yeshua, Adonai Yeshua, alam chalech asech asela, Adonai tzevoi simonu miskov alonu le'yankiv sela, Adonai tzvoi sashadim t'echbach, Adonai Yeshua, Hamelech yaneinu v'yoyim kareinu, Layodim ha'yisa'ira v'simcha v'sasem ikar, kein tiyelanu, Kais Yeshua says, Savashem Adino Yakra, Savi Maranon, Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu Melech Haolam, Boirei Pri Agafen. Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu Melech Haolam, Boirei Minei V'Samim. Baruch Atah Adonai, Eloheinu Melech Haolam, Boirei Moirei Haish. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamavdil, bein kodesh l'choil, bein or l'choishech, bein Yisrael lo amim, bein yom hashvi l'shesh yemei hamaseh. Baruch atah Adonai, hamavdil, bein kodesh l'choil. It's customary to dip the pinky into the wine that put out the candle, and some people wipe it near their eyelashes, put it in their pockets, spread the blessings. I'm not sure the exact reason for it, but it's an old tradition. Go down, go down, go down. So I want to first of all wish you a good vach, Shavua Tov. Before I forget, I just want to say there's a blessing we make after we drink wine. After blessing. And I want to say it right away so I don't forget. Baruch atah Adonai Melech haolam, ala gefem al pri yarafim al tnumas asad barachem do tever chaver shisid v'chad labsin lachem bepirim v'sal metuv lachem nani oleinu shalom nacha v'asham nacha latzim v'sham gvedach v'malchus v'achach v'alei chalach v'nei yisham v'chedesh meir v'aminu v'aleinu l'sech v'zam v'chaleinu v'aram brach v'odeh shabbat hara v'atah adnei tev v'edek l'achelu v'nei l'chal l'sal pri yarafim baruch atah Adonai l'sal pri yarafim. Shvua Tov. So on Motzei Shabbat, there is after Shabbos, there is a custom to, first of all, we sing a few songs. We're joyous. We wish each other Shavua Tov, a good vach. We also, some people are accustomed to sing a Menshech is here. And so right after Shabbos, now is the opportunity for Eliyahu Navi to come. So we mentioned Eliyahu Navi. And one of the most famous songs of Eliyahu Navi is Eliyahu HaNavi, Eliyahu HaTishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Agiladi. Bimera v'yameinu yabo eleinu Mashiach ben David Mashiach ben David Eliyahu HaNavi Eliyahu HaTishbi Eliyahu 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 Agiladi. Before we start off with Eliyahu, who is the Tishbi, Eliyahu Agiladi from Gilad. The word Tishbi actually also means, Eliyahu Hanavi means Eliyahu the prophet. Eliyahu HaTishbi comes from the word Toshav, which means resident. We know that Eliyahu Hanavi didn't pass away and continues to live on. He's the only from the two people that we have a tradition that they never passed away. He's still around. And so he gets around to our houses every Pesach and to every bris. So while we are called Gerim, where we are sojourners, we're temporary in this world. Eliyahu Navi is called a Toshav, which means a resident. He is a long-term resident in this world. So he's called Eliyahu HaTishbi. And we say, Hera Yavo Aleinu, let him come to us speedily. In Mashiach ben David, with Messiah, with Mashiach, who is the son of David. Eliyahu Navi, Eliyahu HaTishbi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Agiladi, Bimera b'yameinu, Yavo Eleinu, Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben David. There's a custom amongst Hasidim to share stories, or story of the Baal Shem Tov, or any inspirational story on Motzei Shabbat. It's especially significant that on this Shabbat that we bless the new year. Tonight is Rosh Chodesh, new month. The Shabbat that we bless a new month. It's the first Shabbos of the year, the first Shabbos Bereishit, the first Torah reading of the year, but we bless the new month. We're now concluding tonight the month of Tishrei, the month of all the holidays, and we're entering in to the month of Mar Cheshvan. And it is customary on the Shabbos before, either on the Shabbos before or on the Shabbos on the Saturday night after Shabbat, to have a Farbrengen. Something that we always did at Chabad of Old Japan throughout the years on Shabbat, the Kiddush luncheon, and we always had shared stories and words of inspiration and sang nigunim and songs. So in place of a Farbrengen on Shabbos afternoon, this will take its place, and I'll share two stories and maybe a song or two. The first story is actually from the daily message from today, and talks about the power of our words. And I think the significance of the power of our words, that we know that we created in the image of God, and Hashem, God, created the world with his words. And words are very powerful, not only because they can uplift or hurt people, but the words, the energy of the words that we say actually have an effect in the spiritual world. So every word that comes out of our mouth can either create positive energy or negative energy. And the story was that there was someone in the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov was the founder of the Hasidic movement. And there was an individual in the Baal Shem Tov shul who was in a simple Jew who was in an argument, a fight with someone else, and he called out, he said about the other guy that he was angry with, I'm going to tear him up like a fish. And the Baal Shem Tov called over his group of followers, of his students, and he said, which is something that he did more than once, and he said, I want you to put your hands on each other's shoulders. And the Baal Shem Tov was known that when he put his hands on, when he told his students to put their hands on each other's shoulders, and he would put his hands on their shoulders, he would take them to a spiritual world and show them things that they didn't see in this world. The Baal Shem Tov put his hands, and told them to close their eyes. They suddenly became very, very scared. They saw a fear came upon them, because they saw a sight that they had never seen before. And they saw this man tearing up his friend like a fish. The point was, the Baal Shem Tov wanted to teach them that, he cursed out the guy, you think it's just, okay, he just cursed him out. Maybe he made him feel bad or whatever, but no, it's much more than that. And when a person says words, those words have a much greater effect, much deeper impact than one can ever imagine. So our words, that's something to reflect upon. Our words are very powerful. And just like Hashem created the world with words, our words too create positive energies and negative energy. Now there is an idea, a concept, that when a person is feeling negative energy, he should speak it out. And I believe according to Jewish tradition, Jewish teachings, the opposite is true. If a person isn't feeling good, instead of letting out negative emotions and speaking it off, while there's truth to it, that a person has to sometimes let off that negative energy and so on, the most important thing to do is not to speak negative things, but rather to fill up your speech and your surrounding with positive energy. And the more we speak about happy things and positive things and good news and so on, the more positive feelings we will have. And from speaking about the negative things that are going on, it's almost like putting paraffin into a fire. If you put water into a fire, you put positive, sweet things into a fire, the fire is going to go down. But if you continue to speak about the things that are bothering you and getting you angry, and you got to tell your husband, your spouse, or you got to tell your friend the things that are really bothering you and about the person that's really making you angry, that is only going to fuel the fire and to make the fire even bigger. So our words are powerful, and they could bring us positive energy when we speak positive things. One of the songs that we always sing on Shabbos at Chabad, and you may be familiar with the song, is Hu Elokeinu. It's part of the Kedusha during the repetition of the Musaf prayer. And it's a song that we always sing at Chabad, and you may have heard it once or twice. And it goes like this. Hu Elokeinu Avinu Malkeinu U'Moshiachenu. It's a song of redemption, that God will redeem us. Oh, Yoshienu ve'yigalenu, ay, 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 yishenes bekarov, ve'yashmienu berachamav le'enei, hochai eleimoy, hengo al tiaschem, macharis, kivreishis le'yois lachem, le'eloikim, hengo al tiaschem, macharis, Kivreishis le'yois lachem le'elokim maya d'alai lai la d'alai d'alai lai la d'alai d'alai da maya d'alai maya d'alai lai la d'alai. So this song actually comes from a very interesting story. First of all, the Rebbe taught this song. I believe it came from a cantor by the name of Rabbi Yechiel, the cantor, who had a very interesting story. In the time of the second Chabad Rebbe, he introduced, for an opportunity for the Hasidim to have livelihood, he set up these colonies where these Hasidim, number of families would live in this colony, and they would work on the ground and so on. And years later, the Russians wanted to really establish these colonies, these areas, and they hired, I believe, German priests or German people to come in, nobility, to come and to be in charge of these colonies. And there was one particular colony which was under a German rule, because what happened was they told them that if they would take care of these colonies, they would allow them to be in charge and have full control over these colonies. So there was one particular colony where this German was in control of. Again, nobility and some kind of priest or something. And the story was that he would go visit this colony. At one point, who were the people who lived in the colonies? These were Chabad Hasidim. We're going back 150 years, perhaps. Yeah. And apparently, he wasn't really concerned about it, but there had been some kind of pogrom. And the Hasidim, the Chabad Hasidim who were living in that colony, were all wiped out. And he had heard about it, but whatever, some Jews got killed. What's the big deal? He didn't really make a difference to him. And he ended up, but he still had to go through and check it out, and the people were working on the land. And when he drove through, this was a day or so, or two after the colony, the Jewish people, the Hasidim, the Chabad Hasidim that were in this colony, were wiped out. He was going through this colony, and as he was going through this colony, he heard crying. A little young child. So they went to see where this sound is coming from, and there was one child that was saved. Unfortunately, everybody was killed, and this one kid, who obviously was quiet when everybody else was wiped out, but this one kid, he survived, and he was crying, looking for his parents. The noble, whatever, the person who was in charge, the priest or whatever he was, he saw this child, and he was taken by his crying and so on, and he brought him home, and he told him that he's his own child. He brought him up, didn't tell him where he came from. The child grew up, he thought he was a German, from German descent. And he ended up, he was a child with an incredible musical abilities. He had an incredible voice, and incredibly musical. So the priest who was bringing him up sent him to Leningrad or wherever it was, the school of music, and he sent him there to learn and to become. He was in school, went to music school, and at one point, while he was in this music school, they were older already. I guess they were maybe college age. I think it was a college, and they went to wash their clothing in the river. You have to wash your clothing in the river, so you wash your clothing in the river. You take off your clothing, you go into the water, and you wash them. And one of the other boys who were with him noticed that he was the only one who was circumcised. And they started to call him Jew. And he says, I don't know what you're talking about. They would start to make fun of him. And they were really getting to him. And he said, what are you talking about? I'm from German descent. My father, my grandfather, we're all Germans. But they continued to bother him until he decided to go home and to ask his father, what exactly is going on? Is there some kind of story? It was really bothering him. So he went to speak to his father. When he went to speak to who he thought it was his father says, I don't know what you're talking about. You're my child. You've always been from our family. But he noticed that, well, his father did it. His father's face, the color of his face changed and became very uncomfortable. And when he noticed that, he said to his father, I see that not everything you're saying is true. And there's something else behind this. Tell me. And he pushed the father to tell him a little bit more about who he was. So his father at the end told him that really I'm not your father. And I found you in one of these colonies after the Jewish families were killed. And the only thing, I don't know anything about your family. All I know is that there's a group of Jews called Lubavitch, which is Chabad, and they were a group of Lubavitchers. And that's all I know. He started to look into different things, and he came to an area where he came across a shul. I think this was actually in Leningrad. Maybe the other place was in Petersburg. I think that where he was studying. But anyway, the details are not of where it was are not important. He came to the shul, and someone saw him standing by the shul. He was very interested to see what was going on. They were singing. So someone came over to him and said, "Can I help you?" He didn't look like a Jewish boy. He wasn't dressed like a Jewish boy. So he said, "I want to tell you who I am." And he told them the story that he came from a colony. They were all killed out. And he just found out the story that he happens to be a Jew from these Lubavitchers. So they said to him, "You happen to have come to a Lubavitch shul. Come in and we'll help you. We'll take care of you." And a short while later, they were heading to Rostov, which was where the Rebbe Rashab, the previous Rebbe's father, who was then the Rebbe, lived. The Hasidim were going, maybe for Yom Tov or for Shabbos, I'm not sure. They were going to the Rebbe, and they told him, "Come with us. We're going to the Rebbe." And they came to Lubavitch. They came to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe heard that he had a beautiful voice. And the Rebbe actually told him, he was young. And usually amongst in an established shul, usually it's to sing on the high holidays is someone who's a senior chazan. But the Rebbe Rashab saw and said he was from a very high soul. He had a very high special soul, this young man. And the Rebbe Rashab said, "Teach him the nusach, the songs for the high holidays. I want him to lead in the shul the service." And this young man, who had a very interesting background, who went to music school in Russia, not knowing that he's Jewish, became the cantor in the Rebbe Rashab synagogue, and he composed some very beautiful melodies. And this was one of the melodies that he composed. Not many people knew it. He composed a few different songs. It happened to be the Rebbe heard this song, possibly from him himself, and the Rebbe was the one who taught it. We know it from the Rebbe. But there was an old Jew, a woman who was from Russia, and she shared this story because she knew it. She had also heard it from the same person who composed the song. So it's a very, very interesting background, very interesting background to the composer of this song. And this song is sung every single Shabbos in, I believe, every single Chabad synagogue and Chabad house around the world. And composed by this young man who had this very interesting story. So anyway, we should have the redemption. We'll sing the song one more time, Hu Elokeinu, and then we will, as I said this morning after the Torah reading, I said we will do now what God did in this week's Torah portion. After each day of creation, God called it a day. Or maybe we'll call it a night. Hu Elokeinu, Hu Avinu, Malkeinu, Moshiachenu, Hu Yoshienu, Ve'yigalenu, Ay, Yishenes Bekaroi, Ve'yashminu, Ve'rachamav Le'inei, Kol Chayei Moed, Hengo Al Tieschem, Acharis Bereishit Le'yois Lachem, Le'Elokim, Hengo al tiaschem machadis Bereishit yoislachem Elokim Ayadelalai Adidayam Tididalai Adidayam Ayayam Ayadidayam Ayam Tididalai Adidalam Ayayam. Hold on a second. I want to thank each of you for joining us for Havdalah. Let me just end the